everyone, Chris here. A couple of years ago, I posted a video about did you go back and lock the door and how that's related to OCD. Really popular video, but it was only about 2 minutes. So in this video, I'd like to expand on that and go into a bit more detail. So what we're really talking about here is checking OCD, and it happens in a whole load of scenarios, but a couple of common ones are, did I go back and lock my house door? Did I lock the car? Did I switch off the electrical plugs? Did I leave the cooker or my hair straighteners on? Things like that. If you feel a strong impulse to go back and check, then that could be checking OCD, and we'll talk about all of that in this video. So what's happening? Well, sometimes let's stick with leaving our house. We'll leave our house, we'll lock the door, usually on autopilot. We're not thinking about locking the door. And then we'll get halfway down the street and then we'll be like, actually, did I remember to lock the door? So there's an intrusive thought saying, well, maybe you haven't locked the door, and it's typically some catastrophizing going on there. So you haven't locked the door, and if you don't go back and check, then your house is going to get burgled. And along with that, there's often a really strong physical sensation. So it's not just that we think, oh, did I lock the door? It's, oh no, maybe I forgot to lock the door. This feels really uncomfortable. And it's understandable when we're feeling really uncomfortable that we want to go back and check, because that will make the feeling go away. And that's exactly what happens with checking OCD, is we go back, we check the front door, we check the car, we check the cooker, whatever it is, and that feeling goes away. But then we walk back down the street knowing that we've locked our door, and at some point the thought comes back, we become less than certain again. Maybe I imagined checking the door, or I didn't do it properly, and that really strong, intense feeling comes back, and we want to go back and check again. Now, this happens to everyone. Like, whether you have OCD or not, we've all been in situations where we can't really remember if we locked the house or the car or turned the oven off. And for most of us, it's fine because it takes a couple of minutes to go back and check. And we might only have this thought once a month, a couple of times a year, something like that. So it costs us a couple of minutes, but it makes the feeling go away, and it doesn't really impact our lives. But for people with OCD, it's much more severe, because this feeling will be happening probably on a daily basis often, and it will end up in that cycle where we'll come home, we'll check the door, we'll walk back down the street, we'll get halfway down the street, and that really intense feeling will come back, and we'll have to go check again, and we might end up checking 20 times. And so by the end of it, we're an hour late for work or more, and it's really impacting our lives. And that's when we start talking about obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD, because it's really impairing our ability to live our lives. It's really causing problems when we're constantly having to go back and check. And we find ourselves trapped in this cycle where we come back and check, the feeling goes away, we try to go on with our lives, the feeling comes back, and we're constantly in this cycle. So there's the intrusive thought, maybe I didn't lock the door, there's some catastrophizing in there, someone will definitely notice and steal all of my stuff, and then that's a really intense feeling that we want to go away. And it's seductive because, of course, going back to check does temporarily make the feeling go away. So in the short term, going back and checking has benefits, but in the long term, it's deeply unhelpful because we're constantly living in this fear that we didn't check the door, and we're constantly going through this cycle of this really intense feeling. So if that resonates with you, if this is impacting your life, then what should you do about it? Well, there are multiple psychotherapies, talking therapies that can work here. The most evidence-based is cognitive behavioural therapy, and it's a specific type of cognitive behavioural therapy called exposure and response prevention, which is essentially where you feel that need to go back and check, and then you resist the urge to do it, so you don't go back and check. And at this point, you're probably thinking, Chris, that's ridiculous advice. If I could stop myself from going back and check, I just would have done that, and I wouldn't have OCD. And so there's a couple of things that we'll talk through in this video, but the best thing I can tell you is recommend that you work through this with a therapist, because I can explain it to you in these 5 minutes, but a therapist will have much more time to do it with you, can build a personalized plan for all the things that we're going to talk about now. So really working with a professional is really the best way to tackle this. Obviously, it can be difficult to access services, so we'll talk a little bit about this, and there are some good self-help books out there as well. But working with a therapist will be the best way to tackle this. So there's a couple of things to think about here, and that's that this idea of short-term gain and long-term pain. So it seems intolerable, the idea of not going back and checking, but the problem is in long-term, that's maintaining our OCD, right? Even though it makes the feeling go away in the short term, it makes the long term worse. And so a good way to reframe this is to think about it as OCD, because a lot of the time we might think, okay, well, it's going to take me 2 minutes to go back and check if I left the cooker on, but if I did leave the cooker on, right, the house might burn down and I might lose all of my stuff. So that's a catastrophe. So 2 minutes to go back and check seems like a really small thing. If I've left it on and I don't go back and check and the house burns down, that's an absolute disaster. So it seems quite rational, it's quite seductive to go back and check because it seems like the rational thing to do. And actually for those of us who don't have OCD, it is pretty rational because maybe if we're feeling that way, we did leave the cooker on and that thought very rarely occurs to us. But if it's happening to us every day, that suggests that something else is going on, and that something is OCD. And so it can be helpful to reframe the debate around, do I go back and check, or is this OCD? Because one possibility is that I genuinely left the cooker on and the house is going to burn down, in which case I should go back and check. But the other possibility is that I have OCD, and that by going back and check, by giving into that intrusive thought, I'm actually making my OCD worse. So then it goes from going back and checking takes 2 minutes, seems harmless, to I am making my OCD worse by going back and checking. So there are some real harmful consequences to me. And then it can seem a bit more rational to say, actually, I'm not going to go back and check. So that's number one, is to try and reframe that debate, not as in it's harmless to go back and check and the consequences are really bad if I do. It's that I have OCD, and so if I go back and check, this is making my OCD worse. Now, the next thing is, well, how do you resist that feeling? Because it's absolutely overwhelming, right? Like the worry and the fear around maybe I did leave the door unlocked is just absolutely overwhelming. So what can you do? Well, you can grade the exposure. So, for example, you could say, okay, I actually am going to go back and check because I can't tolerate this feeling. But what I am going to do is I'm going to set a timer on my watch and I'm going to wait here for 2 minutes and practice tolerating this feeling of maybe I left the cooker on. And then I'll go back and check to make the feeling go away. But I'm just going to do this 2 minutes. And then if you can gradually build that up, then you're gradually building up a tolerance to this really awful feeling that something awful is going to happen, and a feeling that seems completely overwhelming and seems that I have to go back and check. Suddenly we're like, actually, no, I can tolerate this feeling for a couple of minutes. And if I can do it for a couple of minutes, then maybe I can do it for longer. So finding a way to make it a bit easier on yourself to just start tolerating that really uncomfortable feeling, because it's that uncomfortable feeling that will drive you back to do the check-in. Then even if it's just temporarily, you can gradually build that up. So again, the best way to do all of this stuff will be with a therapist who can help you build a personalized plan and can explain it all in more detail than we're going to do in this video. But hopefully that's given you a good starting point. If so, please give this video a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos on mental health, then hit that subscribe button, and I hopefully see you in another video.